With the fifth pick in the 2023 NFL Draft, the Seattle Seahawks select Devon Witherspoon, cornerback out of Illinois. And this is a pick that I think has caught many Seahawks fans a little off guard. Not many folks had Devon Witherspoon mocked to the Seahawks, even though he had met with the team. So there certainly was some interest on their part in taking a look at him. This is a pick that has been a little bit of a divisive one for the Seahawks fan base as far as I can read it here out the gate. People seem to either really be liking it or really be down on it. I kind of find myself a little bit in more of a middle territory / leaning a little bit more into approving and understanding and liking the pick overall. I think this particular pick takes a little bit more to unpack than your normal selections do. So we're going to go a long way around the world a little bit on this one with Devon Witherspoon to get really the true read on what the Seahawks are bringing in and what kind of player they're getting and why they made this pick at number 5 versus going in other different directions. First, let's talk about the player that you're getting right now. Devon Witherspoon is an absolute dog on the football field. This is a man that plays with a chip on his shoulder. He is going to be up in that receiver's ear and he's going to be letting him know all day long about how badly he's going to stop him, about how few catches he is going to allow. He is just not letting you catch the ball at all. This isn't merely a guy that's a zone-based corner, sitting back and off coverage, just being assignment correct, not getting beat over the top, but yet giving up short completions up in front of him. No, he is on it snap after snap, right there in the hip pocket of the receiver, doing his job and doing it very well. He also brings some ball hawk skills to play. He had 3 interceptions last year. I think he even had a couple of tips that went on to be interceptions. He's going to get his hands on the ball. He can track the ball. He's going to put himself in a position to be able to intercept the ball. 5 picks, I think, in the last 3 years. So he brings that element as well. He is absolutely going to tackle in every respect. And not only tackle, he'll lay some hits sometimes. He is going to come up and be violent in that aspect of things. Yes, he is a little bit undersized at 5'11", but he doesn't play undersized. And certainly it's not always what they say, the dog, the size of the fight in the dog, or the dog and the size of the fight of him. I don't know how they say that saying, but that's what you would apply to him, as his fight in him is tremendous. And it's something that you can't just necessarily measure by some combine statistic or some 3-cone drill. You turn on the tape with this guy and it's absolutely undeniable about what he's bringing to bear on the football field in that respect. He's willing to get in there and get dirty. He's willing to do whatever you need him to do on the football field. He is the truly complete corner. So why does this got some Seahawks fans not happy about this? Why are they having some consternation over this pick? Well, I think that it does come from the standpoint of there being a lot more love there for Jalen Carter. There was a little bit of worry at the guy being a little bit undersized. He's got only 31-inch long arms, so he's about an inch shorter than you would normally like for those guys on the outside. And that certainly does bring up certain hesitancies. But the reason why I eventually come around to supporting this pick and liking this pick and approving of this pick comes from the standpoint that the Seahawks, in my opinion, went back to the same well that they pulled the water from last year, and that is the value well. John Schneider mentioned many times over throughout this process of this pre-draft evaluation and this offseason that part of what brought the success last year was the team being willing in their draft process to truly just go for value, not to be driven to need. And when you look at the failures of the Seahawks organizations in the draft, let's say going from 2015 all the way up to maybe 2019, you see those failures rooted in really reaching for need time and time again. They didn't do it last year. They didn't do it last year at all. They let value drive the day, and that's why they had such a historic draft last year. I too believe in this pick and the pick that they made later on in the first round in this draft, that it was value that was carrying the day for them, that's why they made the selection, that truly when they looked up on their board, Devon Witherspoon was the most valuable player that they had there to select. Yes, you had Jalen Carter there, but we can absolutely acknowledge at this point that the character concerns were real, that the character concerns were overwhelming, and that the character concerns were enough for John Schneider to pass on him. Yes, he was taken pretty quickly afterwards by the Philadelphia Eagles, but they had 2 first-round picks, and Howie Roseman doesn't have to worry about the fact if he completely misses on that Carter pick. If that completely blows up in his face, he's not going to get fired over that. He's not going to be questioned over that. I don't know that we would have had, or many other general managers would have had that same kind of goodwill established to be able to just kind of have a freebie pick in the top 10 that they might miff on, where you can see how the failure could be coming down the tracks if the background didn't add up. Tyree Wilson, another guy the Seahawks could have taken out of Texas Tech, is a guy that hasn't reached his top end yet. We don't know where his top end's going to go. We don't know if he's going to get there. He's got a long ways to go as a prospect. Peter Skoronski, a guy that you don't know what position he's going to exactly go out and play at the NFL level. Maybe would have been a fit for us at guard, but you maybe aren't as trusting in that. Darnell Wright, who went a little bit later on in that first round, and I believe the top 10 or 11 picks there. Oh, well, right tackle you don't really need. You would have had to have moved him to right guard. That pick doesn't make a lot of sense. Kalijah Cansey, I love Kalijah Cansey. I wouldn't have hated Kalijah Cansey at 5, but we have to acknowledge he does have about 1.5 to 2 inch short arms than you would have liked to have had for that position. And that's a big worry with him as you go forward. My bottom line point here is that you can go through player after player after player that you would have liked to have preferred to go to, but all of them you can see where the questions would have remained with them that's different than Devon Witherspoon, where those questions weren't there in play, where you knew the player you were getting. And so that then maybe was enough to put his value a little bit over the top of Jalen Carter. Maybe a guy like Jalen Carter is the better player, but the character concerns are enough to really bring him down that board enough to now where Witherspoon overrules that. The one thing you're not going to have to ask about this kid that you certainly were going to have to ask about Jalen Carter is this guy all about ball? Is this guy going to be football all the time? Is this guy going to give us everything that we want to have given in order to have him become successful? And yes, he is going to give you that. The other part is the potential boom of this situation. And I'm not talking Legion of boom here. I'm talking about the boom of success in this situation, because as I said, we got to go deep on this particular pick and what it means. And what I'm saying about that is last year, Tariq Woolen was very successful. I don't have to tell you guys that in his first year out there at corner, but the coaches acknowledged at the end of the season that where a lot of that success came from was him playing man coverage situations. Sometimes it would be man match situations, but it's essentially man that was what was helping bring about those interceptions for Tariq Woolen and allowing him to really shine last year. And so this also could be indicative of going out and giving Devon Witherspoon that the team is looking to draw back towards some of those same man concepts to the other side of the field as well, which now opens the doors to some other very exciting things up in the front seven. But what stands out to me as well within that is that you had a guy here in Richard Sherman for years playing out at that outside corner position where he had a lot of corners, had a lot of interceptions through his first couple of years here in Seattle. But then he got his big contract and teams started to understand about where his reputation was. And we watched teams slowly start to just now only pay attention to this other side of the field, especially once Brandon Browner and Byron Maxwell had left. And so teams could now just essentially ignore Richard Sherman, operate from one side of the field, and still find some semblance of productivity as an offense. Well, what happens if you've got a Richard Sherman type like presence on that side of the field, like you might have now here in Tariq Woolen, and then you can put an equivalency to the other side. And that's very well what you may have with Devon Witherspoon. Now you're not giving the quarterbacks any safe harbor to run to. Now they're forced to throw at one of these two guys. Now you're going to give Tariq Woolen that many more opportunities to go up there and make those interceptions and to have that kind of great impact on the game. So I think there is some intelligence in this approach if they go to that realm of things, but then that is going to be the requirement of going to more man-based principles, because that is Devon Witherspoon's bread and butter as well. He is a guy that can play both man and zone, much like he's a good run defender who can also cover. He can do man or zone, but to me, he is a man-based defender. He had like a 22 rating his way in man situations in coverage last year. That is what he does. That is who he is. You want him sticky in the back pocket of the receiver 24/7, yapping in his ear, letting him know what time it is. That's how you want him to play this position. So you don't want to bring this guy in having him play a lot of zone. And this is really where the rub is, because Seahawks have traditionally leaned into one of playing more zone-based coverage in their secondary than playing the man-based principles. But you now have the two corners on the outside that can run it pure man. And in him last year, all of the statistics match up here, by the way, from the ball hawk skills, the 3 interceptions to the tackle numbers. Go look at his PFF advanced scores as far as Devon Witherspoon goes. He was the second highest rated cornerback in all of college football last year as rated by PFF. He didn't give up one touchdown in coverage last year either. This kid is mightily talented. You can get a little bit worried about the shortness. You can get a little bit worried about the arm talent. But what I beg you to do, what I ask you to do is go turn on that tape and watch this kid play and fly around on the football field and tell me that that's not going to be a mighty improvement over the top of Mike Jackson, Kobe Bryant, or Trey Brown. It's not to say that those guys are bad players, but you're bringing in a guy who truly does have lockdown potential, and you got that with the 5th pick in the draft. So I understand there being some consternation about this pick and that we all have the guys that we fell in love with. Hell, there wasn't any bigger benefactor to Jalen Carter. I was leading the fan club of Jalen Carter. But I've got to acknowledge the value of this pick. I've got to acknowledge that the team in both of the two selections in the first round, which I'm neither am over the moon about, but I can acknowledge that the fundamentals are correct. The philosophy is correct. And what I mean by that is that the team is letting need not draw the day. They're letting value carry the day. They're letting who's the number one guy at my board, that's who we're going to take. I don't want to think about necessarily the depth and all that, just who's the number one guy, because that's how you build up the most stacked team at the end of the day after a couple of years, if you're letting that, in my opinion, win out over anything else. And again, the team, I think, in a lot of the failures that they've had recently have come out more from reaching for need. The reason an LJ Collier pick goes bad is a reach more for a need. The reason the Dwayne Eskridge pick goes bad is it's a reach more for a need, not because of just pure value. So the Seahawks are still operating in my opinion, a very smart realm. We'll see how this pick ends up shaking out. I can understand that it's not as sexy as some of the other picks that they could have taken in that spot, but it might be just what we need, and that would be a tremendous thing. My name is Brandon Kane. This is the Hawks Nest. Please hit the like button. Please subscribe. But beyond all that, don't you ever forget, go Hawks.